I had like a little freak out. Yeah.
We can, yeah, no, we can sit over there. That's the table that people go to for public comment, or we can pull one of these chairs over here too. You prefer?
Ready if you guys are. Ready? Ready? Hey, the cab. I call the meeting to order at 7:01. Stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, liberty, and justice for all. I'm getting a motion to approve the agenda. Motion to approve the agenda. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. I get a motion to approve the minutes of October 4th.
Motion to approve minutes of October 4th.
Second. Any discussion? Yeah. All those in favor? Aye. Passes. All right. School committee chairperson's comments. I have no comments right now. We have a busy agenda. We don't need to hear from you right now. We'll hear from all of us through the course of the meeting, so looking forward to it. So now I'm going to open up the floor to community comments. If anybody from the community has comments they wish to make, if they do, we'd ask you to please sit at the table, identify your name, what town you're from, and then go from there.
Kelly Cook from Upton, also murder person. I do have a question. Would it be possible to move the community comments to an additional section at the end of the meeting? It seems like there's a lot of stuff that's on this agenda that I'd like to ask questions about after having more information.
Thoughts?
I think that's a good idea.
In this moment? Okay. Can I get a motion to move community comments to the end of the meeting?
Motion to move the community comments to the end of the meeting after we've talked about the content for the day.
So that would be, just so we're clear, that would be after the new business section.
Correct.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Thank you. I just make the note too, just to make sure that people are aware, you know, questions can be asked, things can be taken away. I know we'll go through a lot of different commentary tonight. And, you know, the goal maybe is that some of those questions we may be able to simply answer during this point in time. Other questions may require and maybe need to be answered by other people that are either not here or other groups that are not here. And I think the other part that I think people need to be aware of is it's not a point necessarily to, I'll call it critique personnel. If you have a personnel issue or something like that, that should be taken up in a different way. Just put that out there. I don't do as good a job as Dave Loper does, as the moderator in Upton, but someday I'll find his words and put them out there in terms of just kind of staying on point. Questions are there. We're very interested in what those questions are. We're very interested in the thoughts and the perspectives that people have. So, just thank you. All right. Student comments.
So I'm going to call up Higgins, and we have two students, Juliana and Tori. And they are going to be presenting about a new course, Mindfulness and Self-Care in Action. And I will hand it over to them to walk us through our Misco Hill student highlight.
Hi, I'm Sarah Higgins. This is Tori and this is Juliana, and they are two students in my new 8th grade elective called Mindfulness, Self-Care in Action. I met with Ms. Mannion over the summer and we had the opportunity to create this elective for kids, and we came up with the following course description. In this class, students will learn theories of mindfulness and self-care, develop skills related to these topics, practice implementing strategies in a safe and supportive environment. Students will work collaboratively, I'll try, and individually to monitor their progress and development of these skills. Students will explore topics of their choice, as well as discover topics within the curriculum. Portions of the class will be used for independent work, group collaboration, fun activities, sharing, class discussions, and interesting debates. Your opinion and feelings are important and valued. Please bring an open mind, positive attitude, and don't forget to be respectful of others and yourself. The in-action part of the course is what we're actually starting to work and plan on now. And that's to take some of the techniques and things that we're doing in class and create a lesson for the 5th graders in the building, and like to do that in the 2nd term of our class. Why now? I think that teens are more stressed than ever, and practicing mindfulness can help kind of slow down their brain a little bit, which kind of strays, and helps them stay focused, improves their concentration, reduces stress, depression, and it's nice to focus on yourself for a little bit. So I'm going to hand it over to Tori and Juliana, who are going to talk a little bit about our class.
Okay, so we have this activity for you guys, bubble breathing, which is one of like the first few things that we've learned in our class. And you can join us in it if you would like. We have bubbles for you that we brought, and or you could just watch the video and do it with us.
If you'd like to try the bubbles, let me know. I can deliver some to you. And what we do with the breathing is we try to match up blowing the bubbles with the exhale, and inhaling is dipping the wand into the soap. And really you want to try to concentrate on, I always tell them, how long you can get the bubble trail to go, focusing on the exhale. Anybody want some bubbles? Yes, Sam. The dollar store bubbles, so I can't make any promises.
Come on, it's competition.
It's a battle.
If you don't want the bubbles, you can follow along the video. The circle grows and extends as you inhale and exhale.
Want one big, long bubble.
We usually do this outside, by the way.
Strategies you can do is meditation, walk, taking a walk, preparing pictures and emotions, and connecting with nature.
More strategies you could do would be a sensory kit, quick games, kid testing, art, journaling, and putting yourself out there. Two of our favorite strategies would be a sensory kit, which is what I have with me right now. It's a very bulky box.
Going on that slide.
Oh, and So basically, we've talked a little bit about in class the sensory kit, and I find it to be helpful when you're like most anxious and stuff and like in a stressful place and you just need a break and you just like need to take a relax, a chill pill, basically. And so you just put things in there that you like. So for instance, like I put like a candle that I like, so like a candle that smells good to me, and like some lotion and a stress ball and like chapstick or something. And then I have like a cheer bow because I like cheering, so like that brings good memories to me. And like I have a book that I like reading. So yeah.
And for me, it is blindfolded taste. Now, what we did in class was Skittle tasting. What we did is we put blindfolds on, and then we would just like taste the Skittle to see what flavor it was. And why we did this is because we would be using our taste, just focusing on the taste and not on just everything around you and everything that stresses you out, and more just relaxing and calming yourself and focusing on what flavor or what flavor it is.
So now we have another activity for you guys again. We have 3 journal prompts that we would do in class. They're actually 3 that we have used in the past. And so, yeah, the first one is, what TV show or movie makes you laugh the hardest?
The second one is, if you could go back in time and give advice to your middle school self, what would you say?
And would you rather live with 4 hours of daylight or darkness? And would anyone like to answer the question?
Answer first.
They were posed to ask if you could go back and give advice to your 5th grade self, seeing as they're 8th graders. But we just put middle school in there for you. We don't want to reach too far, you know what I'm saying? What are you saying?
I think it'd be buy Apple stock.
As a
That's good enough.
It's great, right?
Even $10 of Apple stock.
It'd be all set.
That'll be a good time, yeah.
Just hang on, enjoy the ride, that's all I would say.
Exactly. It's not that bad.
Yeah, it
Don't
looks like
take
it's
yourself
bad,
so
but it's not that
serious.
bad. No. And movie makes you laugh the hardest. Which one?
There are some good ones out there. It's a hard
Do you
question.
remember what your answers were?
I said for, I don't think I was there for the what TV show or movie makes you laugh.
Okay.
But I think for, if you go back in time and give your middle school self-advice, I think it would be kind to everybody.
What TV show for me was one TV show or movie makes me laugh the hardest. For me, it was Click. I don't know. I just tend to like laugh a lot because he's like a really funny person.
Yeah, I'm aging myself, but it's, for me, when I was a kid, I laughed my butt off at Young Frankenstein. That's how old I am.
So, do you guys have any questions?
How often do you find yourself going through the box and doing the exercises and everything like that?
So I guess it depends on like the type of person you are. You couldn't just say it by like just how I go, but for me, I would say more than once a day for sure. If like I wasn't in school and I was just at home. But if like I were to like really dig into it and like use all of like the coping strategies and stuff that we've learned and like things that are mindfulness that we haven't learned in class, I would say like more than like 5 times a day. So I think that it's like an important thing to know and learn about. So.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So how long was the class run for?
It's actually semester long, so I get them for 2 terms, and we meet 2 to 3 times a week depending on the day cycle. And it's really nice to have them for that long, for sure. It's nice to just do the little things with no stress or pressure for them or me, so. And they're all invited to always bring ideas and things to class too.
Yeah, and it's just like a break from like all of the work throughout the day. We get like just like a period of like, oh, we get to go outside and like look at the leaves and think about like what we want to do or what makes us happy. So it's nice.
Yeah, it's very nice.
What's your favorite food to eat mindfully? I forget what you called it. Mindful eating.
For me personally, I think, she did like Snickers, like the Snickers on the weekend. And it tasted so good. She let us like try. I really liked it.
I attempted to do an experiment where their taste changed due to music frequencies. It didn't go so well, but we tried it. So, right? Yeah, it didn't go so well.
So you're trying a lot of new, different things. So these aren't things that you just came and said, oh, I already know all that stuff. How do you find the openness to try all these things?
You just kind of like go with the flow and like even if you've tried it before, there's always like a different way of doing it. So Miss Higgins isn't always going to do it the same way as someone else shows you. There's always going to be like a loophole of a different way.
If you have a fidget from your sensory box, are you able to use it in different classes outside of your mindfulness class if you need to enact that?
That's a good question. It depends on what kind of kid you are. If you're being smart with it, probably.
It's a small, subtle fidget type.
Yeah, if you're being a good kid and not being like some kids, yes. But I don't think that there would be any problem with it, but I think it would more be as like a judgmental thing with it. But if you want to do that, you could.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I can't take it.
Oh, you
Yeah,
can.
no, I'm just kidding. That was fun.
You know where I live. You
You want to play
can
with those tomorrow? No.
I can bring some to
Yeah, bring
you.
some down.
I'm right down the hall.
So before we get into your comments, Maureen, I'd like to just make one note, which is just to say thank you. Because I know there's a group of parents tonight that actually donated a lot of like, there's cider, there's some drinks, there's some muffins, there's other snacks over there. Feel free for anybody that's here to enjoy. Just to thank you for the work and the volunteer and the extra time that gets put in around this committee and the school and everything that gets done. So thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Then with that.
All right, thank you. And I was hoping I could say this when she was still in here, but I'll let her know I said it. I was walking down the hallway the other day after going through some classrooms and heard this laughter and kind of joyful conversations taking place in the classroom. I was in Mrs. Higgins' classroom. I said, all right, we weren't doing these classes here, but I want to see what's going on, all the fun stuff going on there. And it was just, she always does great things in the classes. They're super engaged. So I was happy that all of you were able to see a little bit of insight into that. I had a few things I wanted to share tonight. First, we have a couple school district events I wanted to make sure that is communicated out through this meeting, but I also shared it out in the newsletter. Tomorrow night, our nursing team has put together a virtual roundtable webinar for parents and guardians, students and community members, and that's at 6:30 p.m. In addition to our nurses, guests will include Dr. Rydell, who is an associate professor of pathology at Harvard Medical School. And he's also associate medical director, clinical microbiology laboratories, and Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. So a lot of different places. And then we also have Dr. Lucas, our school physician for our district, will be there as well. And he's also a pediatrician at Tri-River Family Health Center. We sent the links out for people to sign up, but they are going to be sharing. They sought out some questions from the community. They're going to be answering those questions related to vaccines at that roundtable tomorrow night. Secondly, we have They are hosting a COVID-19 vaccination clinic for our MISCO and NITMUC students on Friday, October 22nd. That's going to be during the school day, and the second vaccination for that will be held on November 12th. I'm pretty sure we have to have a certain number of students that sign up for it, and so we're just trying to keep getting the word out just to make sure that we have enough that we can actually run the clinic on site. My next item here to share, I have invited Molly Walsh. I'm going to ask her to come on up to the table. I'll say a couple words, and then I wanted to let you know that I was really happy that we were able to recognize her outstanding work recently at the Blackstone Valley Superintendent Consortium that runs a Promising Practices event, recognition event every year. And she was recognized for a creative adaptation of curriculum last year, where she taught her students how to play ukuleles, and she'll give us a little highlight on that. But the goal is to recognize outstanding educators to ensure that we continually share their work with others. So there's a whole booklet, I think I linked it in there for you, but we share that out through all of the Blackstone Valley schools every year, and this has been going on for over a decade.
Maureen, my
yep.
apologies. Apparently they can't see the video. I'm getting texts about that.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sure. Give that a minute.
Apologies. Which one are we on? I'm sorry, which PowerPoint?
Okay.
I can see it now. All right,
Oh, sorry, thank you.
I don't know what it was.
great. So I asked Molly to come so we could publicly recognize her here, since
Great.
we were in front of some of our peers, but wanted to have her be able to share a couple highlights of what the reason why she was recognized. I'll hand it over.
Thank you, Dr. Cohen. It's an honor to be this year's Promising Practices recipient. It was so rewarding and refreshing to be among so many inspiring educators at the Promising Practices ceremony on October 1st. So many inspiring projects took place in Blackstone Valley over the past year. And I loved hearing about how educators across all disciplines and grade levels inspired students throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. These educators made their students' education and social and emotional well-being a priority during a challenging time. Last year, I rewrote my 3rd and 4th grade curriculum to adapt to the new guideline of not singing indoors. I had to think of a new way to teach music concepts and decided to use ukuleles, as they are a melodic and a harmonic instrument. I taught the same musical concepts that I always do, including harmony, melody, rhythm, and form with my new ukulele curriculum. Students that were in person as well as remote participated in the ukulele curriculum. And students learned all of the previously mentioned music concepts as well as ukulele technique. Over the course of several months, students learned to play folk music and popular music on the ukulele. It was incredibly rewarding to see how many students adapted to this new curriculum. They were enthusiastic and excited to play ukuleles. Many even purchased ukuleles to play on their own at home. So I would just like to thank Janice Gallagher for supporting this new curriculum and buying me a ton of new ukuleles so the kids could play them. Simon Harding for helping me brainstorm ideas for this curriculum, and Dr. Cohen and the MURSD community for this amazing opportunity. Thank you so much.
Very good. It's great.
Congratulations.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Wonderful. Was that in,
Do you have any questions?
was that in, did you replace the recorder agenda?
We did. We replaced, before I came here, the recorder agenda was replaced, which is one of the reasons I proposed.
Yeah, I just knew that was a rite of passage. Kids were in elementary school.
The ukulele is a lot easier to adapt to students' needs. Where on the recorder, you can either play it or you can't play it. Like you can play the note or you can't play the note. But we have students with many different needs. The ukulele can be adapted to play a bass line or chords or a melody, or playing one note of the chord while somebody else plays another note of the chord. So it's melodic and harmonic, which is great, and it's just so adaptable.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And then finally, I just wanted to give a couple updates. Let's see, we're heading towards the end of October. So we presented our strategic action plans a few weeks back. and just wanted to give some highlights related to some of the work that we've already begun this year. So we're off and running with our beginning of the year assessments in iReady, Thrively, and Panorama. And actually, I was able to observe a great faculty meeting today at NITMUC where they were looking at the Panorama data together and looking at the Thrively data and just getting a sense of how that new system works. And for those of you who aren't as familiar, the Thrively assessment in particular is strengths-based. And so it's great because we're kicking off the year looking at the strengths of our students. And the Panorama data that we have, we were looking at from last year, the SEL data I shared last year, we will be starting this year at some point. It's in our schedule after I'm ready to have the Panorama assessments in place as well. At the end of this month, we'll be launching an audit of our MTSS practices through a survey to staff. And we actually have a self-assessment that is in Panorama. So we're really fortunate to have that tool because not only can we use many of the surveys that they have developed that for students, we can use it for staff. There are also parent surveys as well that we can access at some point. And so that is the beginning of our work and how to strengthen our MTSS system and supports for our students. Let's see, we've started to implement our plan for SEL modules in Thrively. Dave Quinn has been leading that and organizing and meeting with teams at all of the schools in regard to various SEL modules using that platform. We launched the Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain book study. It was launched with our leadership team to begin. And we launched the district book study with our staff in November. We, as you can see, because we have one coming up soon, we're starting our departmental departmental updates about programming. And then in about a month or so, we'll start our budget updates, which is part of our budget aspect of our strategic plan. And we have the teaching and learning highlights. We've now seen a couple of them. We just had our MISCO and we'll be rotating through so you can all see the teaching and learning highlights. And we're also adding those into the district newsletters as much as we can, and of course through our websites and other venues. That's it for the strategic action steps so far to start the year. I don't know if you have any specific questions relating to that, or we can move on to the administrative comments.
Are there any initial figures coming back from the iReady or Panorama feedback that you could just espouse on, or?
I haven't, I'll be honest, I haven't looked at them yet. We're just completing the iReady data, but the work, and we are so fortunate to have our new assistant superintendent. By the way, it's her first day today officially for every day. So that is one of her big tasks that she'll be working with the schools and reviewing that data from a larger view, but they are working at a building level already with the data. Yep.
Because I'm really intensely interested in that.
Yeah.
That's like,
yeah.
Because I've gotten feedback from different parents, but a lot of parents are saying that we've kind of accelerated things at the beginning of this year. And I don't know whether it just feels like we're getting back to normal again. So it just feels different than COVID did, or whether there's kind of an instinctive reaction to make up the lost time that's kind of accelerating everything. But I can tell you, I feel like my family is just completely dragged out. It's incredible how much stuff we're doing right now. So, both how the kids fared for COVID, obviously, and where they stand now, obviously, that's the stuff we want to see.
And what's most effective for us with iReady is the fact that it's giving us that individual student data.
Right.
So I was talking to Jenna today, who was our instructional coach when I was over at Club, and I was asking her about the RTI process and what she's been working on and what they have found with the, and now this is at elementary, but what they found is with the DIBELS assessment that we've always done as initial assessments, and now we're adding in iReady, and we have both of them together, that they're seeing a really stark alignment between the two, which is good because it's backing up the data. And so then she's leading them in follow-up assessments to dive deeper with those that seem to be falling below whatever mark maybe they should be at the beginning of the year. So she was just describing the process, and she was about to head off to meet with a group of students to look at that follow-up assessment. So, and iReady right now is, we use it K-8, so that doesn't address any of the high school, concerns that you're bringing up, but it does give us individual data and that grade level to have a sense related to curriculum instruction in individual student needs.
In the end, the evidence always should state what is actually going on. And we've got a lot of presumptions here. We've got presumptions that the lower grade levels might have been affected more by being separated by the COVID pandemic than the higher grade levels. But, obviously, we can see how all of our schools are being impacted by it. And I'm sure that's in your plan. I just want to reiterate.
And one thing too, just we have parent-teacher conferences coming up in November. And so that's a great opportunity for parents to have those one-on-one conversations with their teachers. I encourage people to sign up when that information gets out, but to ask those questions specifically about where their student is at or child's at this point.
I just have a quick question on iReady. Is it just giving assessment data to show where kids are at, or are there can you then take that individual feedback and use tools within iReady to then address those areas that they need, we need additional
Yeah,
support?
that's a great question. There are actually two things that it offers. So first we have the diagnostic assessment, and that's a lot that we talk about, right? But then within it, it will say, so I did this before our summer learning programming. So kind of we pulled the data and then we were able to identify the skills that they needed to work on. And then it has guidance for the teachers that they can pull up for specific skills. And you can group them together by certain skill groups and use it for different flexible groups and interventions that you would need to do. But we also have right now through probably through a grant, I'm trying to think. I think through the one grant, yes, the Acceleration Math Grant I talked about last year, we have the iReady personalized learning platform for math. So will have the ability to then do targeted online lessons as well. And I just I'm waiting for approval for the reading because that wasn't in our budget to have that, and that we couldn't use that in the Acceleration Math Grant. Otherwise, I would have figured out a way to have it be paid for. And we're able to do a pilot this year, so I'm just waiting for that system to be set up, but we'll be able to use that reading piece for personalized instruction this year as well.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Is there a writing component, or is it just reading and math?
Just reading and math. Yeah.
So that brings up a good question. I think some of the things Sean said, and Vicki was just alluding to. So when do we think we'll have a kind of a more macro-oriented view of the impact all of these changes over the last 18 to 24 months have had?
I would say, we could use the beginning of the year data, and we could compare it to last year. I don't know how it's going to say that
I understand.
there's a
Yep.
lot. So I don't think that's the best data. My recommendation, because we presented last year,
Mhm.
after we did that mid-year type of benchmark, I almost think after that time would be the time that we can see, because then we'll be able to see really track the growth over that year and in the short amount of time. And we'll see if what we're doing right now is starting to take effect. That would be that's my initial reaction, but I would say, once Cheryl's able to kind of jump into it as well,
Yeah.
we can follow up and come back with, that high level data as we tend to do.
So like the second half of this year.
That's my initial reaction, but I can talk to the
Oh,
team.
great. I don't,
And
you
see
need time.
what makes sense. I know we have a couple of principals here, we can talk after and see what makes sense, since they're the ones that are doing the initial look at the data as it's coming.
Great.
Okay. All right.
All right. Administrator comments.
So we have, so we have Jen D'Angelo. She's going to give a overview of some programming, highlights of changes that have been put in place, grant funded, updates, program reviews, etc. Hand it over.
Good evening. Thanks for having me this evening. Sam, ready?
Ready.
Sam's my cue man tonight. Yeah. Cue me through. So we're doing a quick overview tonight of student services to talk about kind of the things we've done last year, implemented, things we've reviewed, and then kind of where we're at moving forward. So our first slide talks about our numbers in the district. So this is approximately about 415 students in district that receive services across our 4 buildings. I broke it down by elementary school to give you an estimate of the number of students in our programming. I've included our pre-K because pre-K falls under my department as well, so it gives you a little bit of an idea on the early grades. And then also I talk about the programming. So currently at Clough, we have about 25 students in our pre-K program, 62 students in our K through 4. Memorial, 79 students, 30 in our pre-K program. And we had talked about that when I did our pre-K update a few weeks ago about the volume of students coming in through the pre-K program. And at this point, our pre-K program at Memorial is closed. So any of our new kiddos coming in will have to attend pre-K at the Clough Elementary School, regardless of the residency town. And then MISCO, we have about 160 students in 5 through 8. We have one sub-separate program over at the middle school. And we also have small group ELA and math courses from some of our kiddos. And then Sam, you're excited, no worries. And then at the high school, we have 2 sub-separate programs along with our inclusion supports. And then currently there's 28 students who receive services through programs outside of the district. And that's a combination of day programs where they go on a daily basis and then a handful of students who participate in their education through residential schools. Thanks, yeah, thanks. So accessibility had been a challenge. So the end of 2020 when we had started through the pandemic and through last year. So we were fortunate to come in last year and implement some technology enhancements that were helping us through that process. Our first one was the Pearson DAL. DAL stands for our Digital Assessment Library. So as many of you know, part of special education is assessment, formal assessments, either during the initial evaluation phase or once every 3 years for our students who do have IEPs. And that was something that the district really struggled with at the end of when we went remote in 2020 for the pandemic. So when I came in July of 2020, we looked at ways that we could kind of utilize technology in the event that we had to be remote, which we ended up being a little bit remote in the beginning. So the Pearson DAL provided that access for us. So it's a library of assessment tools ranging from cognition to achievement to screeners, and we subscribe to that. It provides virtual assessments and scoring. It reduced the timing for manual tasks that are associated with some of these assessments. And it also provided us with a wider range of assessment tools because then we had an option to really kind of pull from a variety of testing. So for those of you who don't know, anytime we buy an assessment kit for the district, those can be updated every 4, 5, 10 years. And we do have to subscribe and purchase the new testing kits. So this provided us the most accurate, up-to-date options for our virtual testing. And then the second one was Docusign. Docusign is our electronic signature software. So what that allowed us to do was to send our documents electronically through a secured system and receive signatures. This created an efficient delivery for time-sensitive topics. And it also provided tracking and access for electronic. And then what it also does is it gives everyone an option to access that document at any time. So it gives their families a live link. They can download it and then they have constant access to their IEPs. So those were 2 of our accessibility improvements. We also did some reallocation of resources. So when I started in the district, there was a lot of contracted services happening. So what we did last year is we put a real hard effort into bringing some of those services in district. There's a lot of benefits to having these staff members in district beyond just performing their daily tasks. So to date, we've been able to add 2 school psychologists, one at the elementary level who services both Memorial and Clough, and then one this year who's working in our middle school and high school level, providing those same services. At this point, their primary function is just assessment, just because where we are in the system. But our goal later on is to have them be integral parts of our at-risk teams, our intervention teams, and our school makeup to really provide some feedback to our teachers and staff in a proactive way. And then our last new addition this year, we were able to add a board-certified behavior analyst. Up until this point, we had contracted with a couple of different BCBAs. I'm going to get to our program review later on, but one of the recommendations that came out of that program review was to have a in-district person who was be able to provide that support on an ongoing basis, be available for crisis management and training with our teachers as well. So that was another position that we were able to add in. Another point, we're investing in our teachers. So this is another thing. So we're looking at providing some specialized instruction to our teachers for training, so that those teachers in district have Mendon-Upton, have Orton-Gillingham, have Wilson certifications, to not only provide the services that are required by the IEP, but also be able to tap into those strategies when we're working with all kids who may need a different learning style or may a different approach to instruction. So right now I have one teacher doing Mendon-Upton, and I have 2 teachers engaged in Orton-Gillingham training.
And what are those?
Yeah, great question. So Mendon-Upton has 4 different components that you can train in. I took a little picture of one. The one that we're doing right now is around phonemic sequencing. So sounds, creating sounds for basic reading. And then Orton-Gillingham is also a reading program that focuses on reading, spelling, comprehension, and similar to Wilson, but more of a global approach to reading. So those are happening right now. They're not, so just to kind of give you an idea, they're not like a 1 or a 2 or a 3-day PD. So for example, the Orton-Gillingham was 4 or 5 days over the summer that the teachers invested, and now they're doing case studies throughout the year. They have to do so many hours with a pilot of group of kids. So we have a group of kids at Pluck who are engaging in that work with one of our teachers. And then at the end, she has a mentor who she'll present to, and then they endorse the certification. So it is a little bit of a lengthy process that they're engaging in. But I have to say, when I put it out, we had a lot of volunteers, so that was exciting to see. And then our last, so assistive technology console. So one other thing we did, so we moved to the 1-to-1 for everyone across the district. Last year, we were able to contract with an assistive technology consultant who came into district 1 to 2 times a month. She met for about an hour. She worked with teachers. She worked with students around accessing features on their iPads. So that was really helpful. The teachers found that helpful. The students found it helpful. So she's back this year doing that same kind of work for us in that capacity. We were also able to add some additional Tier 3 supports. So we collaborated with the Brookline Center for Community Health. Many of you probably who are familiar with this know it as the BRIGHT program. So they came out with us last year and engaged in a year-long assessment and development process at NITMA. We have a similar program at MISCO that was started, I believe, 3 years ago. So last year, we were able to kind of do that work at the high school. It's geared towards providing short-term intensive assistance for students returning from extensive absences due to either mental health or medical leaves. So we were able to put that process and do the foundational work last year, working with the Brookline Center for Community Health. And we do have dedicated spaces this year at both MISCO and NITMA that provide those services. And the 4 key components are kind of what the program is focused on. So that's the clinical support, the academic coordination, the family engagement, and then the care coordination. Yeah.
Are all the adjustment counselors in place to support that program now, or?
They are.
Okay.
Yeah. So we went through a hiring process. In August, we were able to find someone for the high school, and then Jen Mannion would diligently continue her search because at the middle school, we had 2 open positions, 1 to replace the position and then 1 to put in for the program. And she was able to secure that person a couple weeks ago. Right. So we are fully staffed and operating and doing well. So we had a couple of grant opportunities last year that we were able to take advantage of. So IDA federal targeted program improvement grants. They were focused around strengthening our assessment, our instruction, our technology. There was 2 main ones that came in. One was for our upper grades, and then one was for our pre-K programming. So I'm going to take you through both of those. Here's just a kind of quick summary of strengthening assessment to use data and technology. So some of the things that we did last year with the upper grade one is we increased our assessment capacity. We were able to hire some contracted services to come in and look at cognition and achievement scores across the middle and the high school. We were able to provide some additional support through contracted services. We purchased external keyboards for some of our kiddos through that assistive technology consult that I spoke about. We learned that some of our kids really did better with a keyboard attached to their iPad. So we were able to fund the purchase of about 50 external keyboards for those kids to utilize with their iPads for functionality and efficiency when they're in their classes. And then we were able to conduct a program evaluation of our STAR programs, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. So the pre-K program was also targeted to improve the program. The pre-K teachers and coordinator met together and we decided that the curriculum hadn't been updated in some time, so they wanted to engage in the curriculum review. So the four of us worked together to review 3 different curriculum models. Eventually we settled on the World of Wonders pre-K, which aligns with our K-4 curriculum, so that was a nice piece added bonus for us. They were able to purchase classroom resource kits for both elementary schools, access to the digital resources, and then again, that alignment with our K-4 Wonders curriculum was a big selling point. So this is World of Wonders in action. So this is one of our pre-K rooms doing a little science experiment. So their prompt questions was, what does science mean to you? And what does it mean to observe something? So there they are with their magnifying glasses and their pumpkins and some seeds and some great fun gooey things on the tray. And then here is recognizing and identifying letters for their first names. So this was also part of the kit that we were able to purchase. It came with supplemental materials like the keys, the letters that you're seeing here. It came with read-along books. It came along with some puppet kind of toys that went along with it. So this is them recognizing the letters of their names. And then here's the sing-along books. So these are the ABC books that follow along with the teacher as they're reading and singing. And I wish I had audio for the singing, but that did not come along. So there they are following along with their books. I was also able to write a grant through the Doug Flutie Foundation. So we wrote a grant to improve and update some of our reading programs and our board maker services through that. And we were the recipient of $2,725. So we were able to buy the Edmark reading programs for 3 sets of that, and then 2 sets of the reading and 3 sets of board maker for all of our programs. And that's the board maker. So what the board maker does is it creates the visual pictures that go along with the words. So our kids can pick the picture that goes along with what they're trying to say to create the meaning, and then place it over to create their daily calendar. Any questions about that? I'm going to stop before I go to the next piece.
No, that's the first time I heard that grant. Well, we should have a whole list of the grants that we're getting, you know? Like that, sometimes these are flying, nobody realizes that we're generating this money. So I think we should illustrate that a little bit more, highlight that as all the grants, maybe on the page or something.
Yep.
So I think that's impressive.
Okay, so this was also grant funded, so we did a program review. So every year in special ed, we have to identify one area that we evaluate. And this is just to continue to make sure our programming is updated, accurate, and meeting the needs of our students. So last year, we engaged in a program evaluation of our STAR programs. We utilized Applied Behavior Institute, ABI, and they are a local company out of Worcester. They provide district supports, but they also do private supports outside of school settings.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So what does STAR stand for?
I don't.
Oh, I got it on my phone.
Oh, you do? I don't know what it says. Students.
It's strategies for teaching based on autism research.
There you go. Thank you, Sean.
No problem.
I thought I had it all covered. So this went over all of our programs. So we have 3 STAR programs. I kind of put it up here just to give you a summary so you guys knew. They are pre-K, post-secondary programming based on the ABA principles, and they are located in Memorial, Misco, and Nipmuc. So we have 1 at each level for our kiddos. So the program evaluation came in and they did a full review. Their review consisted of interviews, observations, record review, data analysis. They were here for over the course of 3 months, and then they presented their final findings. And in the report, they were able to identify complements of the things that we're doing really well, and then a list of recommendations for continued improvement. So up here, you'll see the compliments. So they complimented our dedicated staff and professional staff with the expertise in this area. They talked about our allocation of resources that are responsive to the student needs. And then they talked about using our ABA methodologies that they saw during their observations. And then we listed out a couple of those. Our recommendations. So they also provided a list of recommendations. I have 2 slides for the recommendations. I'm going to go over the evaluation summary here. And then the next step is the same list with our action plan as we continue to implement and look at ways that we can improve our programming. So they asked to develop a clear written program description to drive all of our programming.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Go back to the evaluation just quick, so I understand.
Yeah.
So they interview and they observe, so they observe the teaching?
They did,
Okay. Who did they interview?
the teachers.
Okay. Did they interview any of the parents? Or
They did not do parent interviews. No.
Okay. Is there
It
a
was-
reason why we didn't?
It's just, so they do this process in a lot of different districts.
Yeah.
And their process is that they don't include parent interviews.
Okay.
Because it's really about the principles and the instructional practices. It's, so they were looking at,
Gotcha.
here's the principles of ABA, here's what we're looking for, here are the components of it, and how has it been facilitated in the classroom.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so program recommendations, develop a clear program description, formal parent training to future the growth of positive skills and the reinforcement and generalization of skills. Hiring a full-time BCBA dedicated to the programs in our students in the district. New and consistent program formats. So they talked about looking at, everyone did a great job, but there wasn't consistency across the district. So behavior charts look different in the middle school than they did the elementary. Data sheets look different at the high school than they did at the middle school. So they talked about really kind of organizing it and putting it together. So there was a consistent format to all of these supporting documents and processes on each level of the program. Grouping the students based on need during discrete trial work, creating and implementing a program assessment tool completed annually. So moving this process in-house. So creating a yearly annual evaluation tool to ensure that we're continually updating and following the practices that we put in place. ABA tech training, so our support staff that works within our programs, looking at providing them more professional development opportunities, including additional training, and then standardizing our transition checklist because we have our students who move from elementary to middle to high school. So creating a transition checklist to make sure that process is more seamless and the kids flow into the next program. In a meaningful way.
And what were they asking about, behavior support plan?
So the behavior support, so that was where the consistent documents came in play. So some kids had a behavior support plan, some didn't. Some formatting looked one way, some looked the other way. So what happens is that consistency helps the support staff who's working with the kids implement more successfully. So they just didn't all look the same. Yeah. And then this is that same list and where we currently are. So right now we are in the process of finalizing our written program description with our guiding principles. The parent training piece is in process. So I'm meeting next week to finalize a parent training schedule. So we're going to have a handful of workshops that are going to be provided for families to access around these same techniques that we're utilizing during the day. So parents come in and can hear about it and then also learn some of those skills and reinforce them at home for generalization. We were able to hire our full-time BCBA. The consistency of the formatting is we're working on that as well. So our new BCBA started in September. So at this point, we've begun a lot of this work, just to, that's why you'll see in progress. And I'm hoping by the end of the year, we'll have some tangibles to bring back to talk about what we've been able to create and implement. The grouping size, that's currently being implemented. The create and implement a program assessment tool, that is in progress as well. We have a draft, but we're, again, looking to make sure that we have a tool that we can use on a year-to-year basis. Our ABA tech training, we were able to do some PD on our last PD day, which was great. That was a teacher day. But our teachers and our ABA techs really have been looking for this work. So they participated with our new BCBA in a training at NISCO, which went really well and got great feedback. And the support staff was really eager to kind of continue that work. And then the standardized transition list, we again have drafts, and we're finalizing those drafts to put in play at the end of this year when our kids transition to their next program. Any questions? That's okay. Any questions on that?
So the START program, so I've, over the years, I've heard a lot about the START program.
Yeah.
Various parents that I've known and interacting with, and I've always heard good things about it. And there's definitely, the word is out that an evaluation has been done.
Yes.
I've heard that.
Yep.
And there, of course, is concern about maybe taking resources away or shifting resources. And it's all spun up with, you know, budget talks that we've had over the past year. So
Okay.
there's a lot of concern right now.
Okay.
So I think just to reinforce that with parents and exactly where Phil was going, trying to get some sort of feedback coming from the parents to understand where they sit, what their concerns are, and just have that communication path open up more along the lines of what the recommendations were.
Right.
Getting organization. of the
Right.
Plan.
Okay.
So all that's fantastic. And
Yes.
if we can just reinforce that with a little bit more communication back with parents, I think that would be fantastic.
So that was so the report has been a hot topic. So, you know, again, I mentioned that it came in at the end of last year at a point that we were kind of transitioning and wrapping up, and there was a lot of changes happening. So I wanted to make sure that we were able to present it here first.
Yep.
And that Dr. Cohen had enough time to look at it. And then, you know, that information is going to be disseminated out. I'm going to talk a little bit about communication paths at the end of like the what's next. But we are going to put some things in place to engage our families in a more meaningful way,
Great.
starting with the trainings and some other things that are coming up.
Yep, fantastic.
So our what's next? So this year, we're also fortunate enough to engage in our Desi tiered focus monitoring. So Desi comes out every 3 years to do a review of our district and 2 hot topics, civil rights and special education. I put a kind of a timeline up there for you. Our self-assessment was completed at the end of last year. We've been working with our Desi correspondent. She will come in on the first week in December, I believe, and do our site visit. She'll do an exit meeting at the end of her site visit. And then we'll receive a draft report in February and then a final written report in March. There's probably about 50 criteria that they look at between special education and civil rights. We don't do all of them every year. They pick which criteria they'd like us to report on. So those were the ones that were identified last year during our self-assessment. We then provided documentation and narratives to support the criteria that they picked for us to respond to. We've had ongoing conversations getting ready for the site visit. What they did this year, which is a little different from years past, which I've engaged in it, is because of the pandemic, they've asked for updated everything. So one of our components was to create time and learning worksheets to talk about the hours of the school day, the instructional time, the gym requirements and that kind of thing. So we did submit all that last year, but due to the mixed schedules and the hybrids and the alternate schedules that a lot of districts had to engage in, they did ask for some of that stuff this year again. So that was just a new component, I think, to maybe weed out the impact of the pandemic when we're looking at our baseline information. So that work is what's going to continue. Like I said, she'll be out in December. There's a press release. So I have a meeting tomorrow where we talk about the press release that will go out to the public to let them know that we're engaging in this process and ways for them to actively engage in the process themselves. So that should be out in the next couple of weeks. And then they'll be in for their site visit, and then a formal report will be sent to us by March. And then we're going to continue to work on our ABI recommendations.
So just so I understand, so
Yep.
this is across all aspects,
Special ed and civil rights.
special ed and civil rights?
Yep. Yeah.
So by end of March, early April, we should have some finding report.
Yeah, so they indicate 45 days for the draft and 60 days for the final. I don't know if they're on schedule.
And what do they use as the baseline of assessment?
They have a rubric online, and I'm happy to share that with you. So there's a criteria, there's a tiered focus monitoring website that talks about all the criteria individually and what they look like for each, what the Desi looks for each of the criteria. And then I also have a list of the ones that we're currently engaging. Yep. Any more questions on that, please? And then we're going to continue to work on our ABI recommendations to solidify our program description, to drive our practices, and looking at creating those checklists and those consistencies across our form supporting documents. This year, as I had mentioned earlier, we have to look at one area every year to review our programming. So this year, we're looking at our specialized services. So those are our C-grid pull-out services. So again, it's just a review to see what's working and to see where we can improve. One of the things we're looking at is we currently have what's called Strategies Lab across the middle and the high school. And that is a small group specialized class for our special education students to work on IEP goals. It's a general class. So what we found is there's kids in there who may have organizational goals, they may have written expression goals, they may have math goals. What we're looking at is, would we be better served to really hone in on the skill development and create an executive functioning section, a literacy section, a math-based section, to really hone in on the skills that they're missing. So that's something we're looking at. We're looking at to see if we can really kind of finite it and make it a little bit more meaningful to the kids than to be in there with kids that are varying in skills and levels. And then the consistency of our IEP language and process across the district. So similar to what the ABI came back with for our STAR programs, we also have that same concern around IEPs across the district. So in order to make it more parent and family friendly, we're trying to streamline our IEP language and processes. So if you go to an IEP meeting at Memorial, and then you go to one for another student at MISCO, it looks the same. We're using the same language, we're using the same format, we're using the same consistency to make it easier for families to engage in the process. So that's our other piece that we're working on this year. Any questions?
I have a few questions.
Yeah.
So I guess an overarching, two, I'll call it overarching theme questions.
Okay.
Which are, what are we doing around the development of a consistent student/parent experience across the district? Because today, the services seem to be delivered, in each school.
Yeah.
Okay. And each school has, it seems, a different, I won't say philosophy, but they have a different kind of persona in the way they approach special education. Sometimes I realize that services differ as you go from school to school and they go through the process, but part of it is there seems to be a challenge, I think, parents understanding that. And then the disconnect comes as I move from elementary into middle school, middle into high school. How are we building that consistency and that clarity so that people and parents understand?
So that's what we're working on when I talk about consistent language and process, right? So that it looks the same at every level. That has not been the case. It looked different. So that's what we're working on as the team chair. So each building has a team chair that kind of facilitates special education at the building level.
Mhm.
That's the work that we've begun working on to make sure that that experience looks very similar so that you know what to expect, you know how to engage in the process, and the expectations around decision-making are similar across the district.
So when you say also too, we're developing a clear written program description, is that also to bring greater detail and clarity over what program and what support services are at what level?
Exactly,
Because I think that's the other area that kind of parents move and the communication happens.
right.
I mean, we had this challenge with curriculum before Maureen and Dr. Cohen joined, where, we had, I think people were struggling with what's the curriculum here? How does it relate to there?
Yeah.
I think that's the same kind of challenge we find today in special education as they go from one school to the next. It's not that the school isn't delivering the services or they are.
Looks different.
It's just different in
Yeah, right.
many regards. And I think that people don't understand the difference, nor is there, I'll call it, that pre-communication and education that needs to go on so that parents understand that transitional point.
Was that the checklist you were mentioning? The checklist to transition from?
That was for our program students, but there is a transition checklist for our high school students too, that's more about secondary transition.
Okay.
But this is really just talking about, how do we, so I'll give you an example. So, reading, right? So reading instruction. Last year, reading instruction looked like on the IEP, reading strategies, supplemental reading, remediation reading, and another term. So all describing reading, which should have been similar, but it didn't look the same and it didn't sound the same because we had called it so many different things. So that's the stuff that we're trying to clean up to make it more manageable for people and easier for them to engage in the process. Because then it's streamlined, and then it's consistent. So when you see reading at Missville, you know what reading at Nipmuc looks like. The other piece that we're trying to clean up a little bit is, again, like that strat lab class where everyone is put in to work in your IEP goals. So if I'm working on written expression and someone else is working on reading and we're at 3 levels apart, it's not a conducive classroom. So really looking at how do we implement curriculum, an executive functioning curriculum into that classroom, if that is the struggle, to develop skills and then reinforce those skills, generalizing it into your content areas later on. So we're going to teach you about time management. So let's look at these strategies or active reading strategies or organizational skills. And we're going to do a curriculum lesson. And then we're going to take your content work from biology and I'm going to show you what an active reading strategy looks like. Or I'm going to take your coursework from history and we're going to look at how to plan out your long-term project. So actually honing in on the skill deficit and then using it to generalize with our kids. So that's some of the work that we're working on this year.
And that's as opposed to what has been going on before, which is just not concerning yourself with the skill, but.
It's general. So what happens is you have 8 students in a classroom and they're all working on a different skill level.
Yeah.
As a teacher, how do you facilitate meaningful instruction?
Yeah.
When there's 8 different goals that you should be addressing.
Yep.
So this is just creating a better opportunity to follow a curriculum and reinforce the skills necessary by grouping our kids based on skill deficit.
And so then are we using that approach to drive maybe the wrong word, but to start to push more the integration of those students back into the classroom?
And that's
So
what
they're
we're
not
generally-
necessarily being pulled out, because I know we talk about inclusion.
Right.
Talk about this area, but we're kind of like half in, half out sometimes.
Right. So that's a twofold question. So yes is your first answer.
Mhm.
So that's the whole point. So that generalization, right? So when we get to the second half of the week and we've learned the skill, I'm teaching you now how to use it in your biology class. So now my hope is that when you go into biology and you see a similar situation, you're then tapping into your strategies and you can utilize that strategy that you learned outside of the class in the class. And eventually that becomes a second practice to you, right? So that's just what you do when you see that. The second piece of that is I have a grant this year that we wrote, and we're going to be revisiting co-teaching. So we have a lot of new staff members, special education and general education. So we're going to be working, Wendy Bell is a partner in this work as well. And we're going to be revisiting co-teaching at all of our levels. And we're going to bring in a consultant to do that work, to meet with our co-teaching peers, to do observational in the classroom, and then get that feedback to fill what you talked about. Making sure that we're not just using a term called inclusion, we're actually engaging in the process of inclusion when we're working with our students.
Just shifting, sorry, I
No,
got
you're
a
fine.
couple different. So let me ask a different question. In the very early parts, you talked about new staff coming in and reallocation of
Yes.
staff. There was nothing really about reallocation, or I guess the other question I have is, because I do know that through the budgeting process last year, we lost some very good people. We also had some people
Yep.
age out, retire, and so forth. Some medical issues, things like that. My question is, do we have all the staff we need in order to deliver the services that we need to be delivering or should be delivered?
That's a great question, Bill. So I think when I talked about reallocation, a lot of what we did is we brought in-house, right? So we had a pretty significant contracted service budget where we were contracting out with school psychologists, we were contracting out with, BCBA, so we had a lot of contracted services. So when I talk about reallocation in that sense, it was we took that information, that contracted line and moved it into our operating budget for staff. Again, it made sense and it created more opportunities for us to utilize those staff than to just pay someone. Contracted service providers are great, but they're here for 2 hours one day and 3 the next, and it doesn't create that support that we really need. The other piece is staffing. I think we're in a good place staffing wise. I would always love more staff. I mean, if that's an option. But I think right now we're in a good place. We have a couple of open positions around support staff, but I spoke to a couple of directors today, and that just seems to be the trend across the state, that we're having a difficult time finding our paraprofessionals, our ABA techs. So those are the positions that we're looking at. It's hard right now to talk about whether we're fully staffed because I think, as you saw, there's a lot of things we're trying to review, and there's a lot of things we're trying to create processes and efficiencies and, build capacity. So the way that we do that is training, right? Is proactive approaches to how do we do this best in the beginning so that we don't have a need for additional staff later on. So that's really been our focus about creating like a foundation and that we're proactively. So, part of that third tier intervention at the high school is really to do some proactive work too around kids and helping kids and supporting kids prior to them having to be hospitalized or out for medical and then coming back and playing catch up. So we're really looking at how can we put things in place to change and be proactive so that later on we're not continually adding new staff.
So when you're saying training, you're saying, since we can't find the staff in the marketplace, train our staff to do it the appropriate way. That's a fantastic effort. So how many of the staff do you perceive are going to be trained in that way? And then does that make up for the shortfall that we seem to be having for allocating people when they leave or when they get displaced?
I'm hoping. I don't think it's a balance because there's always a change in demand, right? So I think creating opportunities where our staff is trained in Linden-Newbell, our staff is trained in Orton-Gillingham. The other piece of that is if you're utilizing that staff for those specifics, they then can't have a whole section of kids too, right? So it's kind of balancing it out and figuring out. But our hope is that if we're providing these instructional practices and this training, that those can be implemented in a tier 1 and a tier 2 support so that we don't get to a point that we need tier 3 intervention where we're looking at 1-to-1 or 1-to-3 ratio. We're able to push those teachers into our inclusion classes, provide those same instructional practices that we would in a small group, but to a broader range of kids.
So when you're talking about, I understood all that, thank you.
Yeah.
When you're talking about consultants, what's the difference in expertise between buying consultants out of the district and having our own internal staff training? What's the difference between?
There isn't.
There isn't.
No. I mean, once you're trained, you have the same level.
Should be the same exact
Yeah.
services, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Well, what you're saying is that when we have internal staff, we actually have the ability to provide the service in a more consistent and a longer term, so to speak. Versus, when you're having a consultant that's only in there for, a couple hours every week, you don't get that consistency.
And when you're only in for a couple hours a week, you're servicing special ed kids, right? Because I'm only having you in to provide the necessary services instead of providing the proactive services at the beginning, where you can go into a class and, maybe there's a third grade teacher who's doing a reading lesson. And now I have someone who has Orton-Gillingham who can go in and provide those strategies with the teacher to the whole class. So you just being able to access different instructional expertise to a wider audience when you have those in-house staff.
I can understand that. I guess the question I would then ask is, what's the transitional method or methodology that we're using to ensure that as we go from even a consultant that has these kinds of relationships with our kids to a new person that's full-time, what's that transitional overlap look like? Because, it is, it can become very disjointed.
Okay.
I realize when special ed students go from engaging with one person, because it is still a very kind of emotional connection that happens over time, to a new person when it's just like that versus, do we have an overlap methodology that talks about transition of relationship, transition of, kind of program, transition of needs, because that's the other thing. You have somebody, I realize they may have only been there a short period of time, but do they actually have the experience with that student? Because it's kind of,
See, we're hearing about this, that's why we're talking about it.
that's fine.
Yeah, so
it's just something we need to think about.
Yeah.
absolutely.
So-
Because this is something where the perception of the service that we're providing changes, and there's a lot of insecurity when that happens. Not that that's a bad plan, that we shouldn't have more resources internally that are
Right.
always online,
Right.
but we have to make sure we understand that the services, and we're trying to make the services more robust, and we're trying to make the training match the capability of the consultant and the relationship with the consultant.
Well, there's a part that I think is not about the capability or the certification. It's the relationship. And the point being is that, you know, at the end of the day, it's still, this piece is very people-based. And so what are we doing in order to transition that relationship over? Because I think it's also, it's the issue we see, and I know you're working on it, is from school to school,
Right.
is another situation where the relationship changes.
Right. And the service providers change, right?
Correct.
That
And those
building-based
kinds of
team looks different.
Right.
And so what happens, if you
Right.
think about it, it's kind of like you start,
Yep.
you ramp up to a point, right, you know, after 3-4 years, parents are in a group, students are in a group, there's a set of relationships, some people making it, and then it's like, boom, you go to a new school.
Right.
Kind of thing. You go
Yeah,
to
and the
next
service
level.
providers don't follow, right?
They don't follow, it's
Right.
kind of done maybe in a slightly different way. I totally get it. I'm not criticizing because I think we all own this
Yeah,
challenge together, but I think it's one where, you know, when I talk about, I use the word experience, it's what is that experience from level to level, school to school,
right,
area to areas, because I think that's, you know, especially I think in special ed, special needs children, it's a bigger kind of emotional piece that is really kind of part of the crux of their learning ability. So,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, we haven't had too many transitions because we don't have we're in the early stages of training our staff. So there's not a lot of that happening right now, right? So we're still getting our staff up to speed and trained. So the transition from middle school to high school or elementary to middle, the teachers do facilitate that process through a transition meeting. And they do, you know, on occasion, I think last year was a little different because of COVID, but they do invite the team members into those meetings to share information. That conversations are happening. But yeah, but you're right, the service providers stay with the building.
but I think I think that's something that has to be, you know, parents need to be educated on. I think we have to do a better job. And I think you're doing, when you talk about the program description,
Right,
from kind of cradle to grave, so to speak, I'll
Yeah.
use those terms. How does that look so that we can communicate it effectively out there? And I think, you know, we can talk about it here. I think as we talk about CPAC, you know, those kinds of things, because those are the areas that, you know, I think will get involvement to help shape it. And people will help to own it too.
right.
Because it's kind of like, you know, parents work with other parents, things like that. So those are the things that are there.
Sounds
And I think because I think you've made a lot of great changes. You've made a lot of great improvements. It's kind of like, how do we get that experiential component there? Because that's kind of one of the missing pieces, and I think you're working on that. It's just a way about how we deliver it right out there. I'll ask one last question.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
No,
And it's actually maybe not just to you, but it's, I think, to Dr. Cohen and the newest superintendent, because I think it kind of delves into this whole performance of how well we're doing. So look around, I've been on the committee a long time, so I remember this conversation. When we started to hire like reading and math coaches, one of the premises was we had an uptick in the number of IEPs coming out of elementary school and middle school, and how do we kind of head that off the paths? And this was one of the improvements that we talked about making in order to manage that. And I realized you weren't here necessarily when that was done, but it's an interesting piece to look and see, like, have we seen those improvements from these kinds of techniques there? And are we tracking kind of the improvement, not only in student performance, but I'll say, I'll go back to the term student experience, parent experience, as we put some of these pieces in place, which I think is an important thing. So
can you just clarify a little bit about outcomes? Like, what are you talking about? Like
quite
implementing?
simply,
like
I mean,
in
okay, so
teachers that should focus
we
on-
hired a bunch of reading and math coaches
Okay,
in the elementary level. Well, we didn't hire a
Just to
bunch,
clarify,
Just read.
we don't have any coaches, we have a reading specialist at each school, we don't have math specialists. So, we just have the one instructional coach we had, you know, that put in the budget, so I don't know if that's what you're referencing, or like the reading specialist that we have, that we've had the last few years, or if you're
it could be
talking
the reading
about.
specialist, it could be the staff, I mean, I have to go back and, I can look
Yeah.
back 7 or
Just
8
so-
years when we had the conversation, dig it
Okay.
out, but
Yeah.
the point is, I think we hired some staff to help support the instructional process of the elementary school, to take the term that was used were essentially bubble IEP kids. Like we felt we had too many kids coming out of elementary school into middle school into IEPs because they weren't maybe necessarily prepared fully or to the level. And we felt we could, if we took more proactive steps earlier on,
Okay, so
we
through
felt that we
instructional
would
support.
reduce IEPs into the middle school. I'm just wondering if we've actually seen that kind of benefit, or we've looked at any other techniques that we think we need to use, or it may not be an issue at all anymore. I don't know.
Okay, so. Well, I didn't want to.
And it may be,
No, no, go for
it may be a more complicated question.
Well,
that
no,
we
no,
have
no,
to
I
put
think
to
it's,
it
I think
another
I
time.
get it. I understand that, sure.
Yeah,
So I think what we're doing right now is we're looking at our tiered supports, right? So when we talk about MTSS, which is our multi-tiered system of supports, we talk about tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Tier 3 is me, that's special ed, so we get to the point that our tier 1 and our tier 2 supports aren't enough support for our students to be able to access their curriculum, right? So what we do is we look at our tier 1 support. So that's kind of what I was referencing when I said we have a lot of trained staff who then can support our tier 1 supports, which are all kids, right? So that's looking at, maybe there just needs to be an additional instructional strategy that's happening. We need to look at, I did this whole thing on reading instruction and, we kind of as a society wait for grade 3 and we're waiting to fail. And then we're putting in supports and instructional interventions. So I think what you're talking about is looking at those kindergartners who are just learning the basics and then saying, okay, hey, come like January, February, we did some baseline screening and we're seeing that this group isn't really progressing the way we want. So then let's get that interventionist in there. Let's do some remedial work. Let's see if we can get them back to, so in June, we're back where we need to be.
Yeah.
And then keeping kind of an eye on those kids that we've identified who are not meeting these benchmarks. So that's around that multi-tiered system of support that we talked about. Or Dr. Cohen had mentioned it earlier about putting that screener out there to get kind of our hands and pulse on where the teachers are with this. And then revisiting where that baseline is so that we can support our teachers in accessing and implementing those tier 1 and those tier 2 supports. So I think that's what you're talking about.
I think so.
Yeah, and I think that's where we are this year. We're kind of creating that baseline of who understands what. We've had a lot of new teachers coming in.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of younger teachers coming in. Who knows what MTSS is? Who knows what that blueprint looks like from the state? The state just revamped their own blueprint on it. So that's another piece of it, putting all that information together and figuring out ways to put those tier 1 and those tier 2 supports in place for that population to then, and some of it is it disability? And we have this question all the time. Is it disability or did we not provide enough diverse interventions and diverse learning strategies to have that student be able to access where they need to access? So I think that's the work that we're doing this year as well.
And that's the report.
And I could add to that too, just, so if we had the whole picture of MTSS in front of us, there are a lot of layers to it, so it is complex. But so one piece too is the high quality instructional materials, which I know you've heard me talk about plenty of times in the past, but one thing that we have with the core resource, for example, the early elementary with our Wonders resource, that's high quality resources, that's really good. That was something that when I came in 9 years ago, we were lacking in those resources. And that's been a big help, and that gives that foundation for the tier 1, but it also has layers for that tier 2 with something called WonderWorks for the intervention. So, but one thing we do in our review, when data comes out, that's why we're so happy about the data systems that we have, is that it'll pull out, we say, is this an instructional issue? Is this a curriculum issue? Is this something else that's going on? And we're able to really dive into it. And so we've identified that with that core resource, it's missing a few pieces. There's no perfect resource, right? So, and then now we're looking at some early education resources that help with reading. So it's all of it together. So staffing one piece, but it's all of it working together. So add that as well.
I think, like I said, I'll go back and say, I think there's a lot that's happened. I think part of it is providing a level of clarity and transparency to the parents that are out there so they understand it. I know you're starting to re-engage through CPAC and things like that. I think it's also good to understand what they believe is missing and what also they believe needs to be more consistent from school to school. Because I think when I talk to parents, that's where I feel like our biggest challenge is.
Yep.
And then the other kind of mystery thing for definitely use that term. You may say you know how it works, but sometimes I know this because, because people live it, they know it, but the people outside that might engage that don't fully see it, it's how does that organization that's in the school that supports all of this really function?
Yeah.
There's you with your role, there's, kind of the heads and stuff
Right.
led at each school. Like, how do they function? What do they do? And I think people might see the delivery of services by people, but they don't necessarily know along the line who's kind of driving decision, evaluation, kind of resolution, those kinds of things.
Okay, so that's a good segue. Any more questions
Pretty good for me.
before I segue up? Okay, so our basic rights presentation, which we hold every year, is going to be on November 16th at 6 o'clock. We tried really hard to get the Federation to come in for an in-person, but they are still doing remote only, so it will be a Zoom. So I will be there, and our team chairs will also be participating in that. And then I will also be doing coffee hours. So we're going to create coffee hours, building-based coffee hours. I think it's too much, and the concerns are too level-based. So I don't think that our high school parents have the same questions and concerns as our elementary parents. So we're going to roll out coffee hours with myself and the team chairs at the building and potentially the principals. And we're going to do those within the next couple of months, and we'll do building-based ones and give parents an opportunity to come in and meet with us and ask any of those questions that they may have.
Excellent.
It's great. I think it's also important that we're sharing back out. Like you said, you're working on the program stuff, but I would also work on a piece about how the organization works. I think that can be a confusing thing.
I'm sorry, you said that was on what date, Karen?
November 16th. And we talk, no, that's okay. I appreciate it though. I'm trying to get clarity. So when we talk about the organization, are we talking about the school district,
We're talking about
special ed process?
the special ed, so the delivery of student support services.
Yep,
What is your function versus
What do I
the
do?
school lead's function versus the principal's function
okay,
versus where, because I think sometimes, and I think for parents, it can get confusing because as they talk to people maybe delivering the services,
yep,
those people say, well, I got told this by this person, this by that person. So our ability to be more transparent about how the organization works and how you get supported, or, part of this too is, the principals overseeing some of the services, people in this, like, sometimes that's a question. That's just simplicity in terms of who kind of does what in a general way.
Just clarifying roles of everyone.
I ask myself every day.
But it's an important thing, because
No,
I
I
think
know.
for us, we can help work with Dr. Cohen and the team to understand and make sure we've got some
Right.
clarity and consistency. Because I do know in the past,
Yeah,
there have been challenges before in terms of the way the organization was structured or way to operate
Okay.
and things that were there.
Yep.
And sometimes it's just it's as simple as, everybody says, well, we just collaborate. That's a great term.
Yeah.
It's great to see that happen.
that's right.
But ultimately too, there are people that need to make certain decisions. So who are those people that make which decisions?
Okay,
And honestly, I have a question about also, CPAC has always been a question mark ever since I've been here,
Okay.
even before.
Yep.
And it's not just how frequently are the meetings conducted, who's leading them? It's like, what types of resources are being made available during the meetings? I remember talking to Diane and Duncan about this back when she was on the committee.
Yeah.
This has been a long-term issue. What I'm saying is parents with special education kids have been very active. Some parents have been very active in that meeting,
okay,
but we haven't had consistency in the group enough to make it a go-to resource for a lot of the special
Right.
education parents. So, how can we maybe beef that up a little bit and make that a better and more consistent resource for parents over a number of years?
yeah,
I think that's a concern we have, because I think people are getting frustrated by not getting that engagement. And really, it's such a valuable resource because
is.
you can interact with the different parents and understand what the different resources are.
right.
But people are sort of getting frustrated with it now, and they're finding they're just going elsewhere.
So it's a parent-driven organization.
Yes,
So if I don't have volunteers, it's really hard.
I get it,
It's
yeah,
really hard to make it a robust resource.
yeah,
So, the point of the CPAC is really to be a parent-driven organization that collaborates with us as the school district around programming. And, it would be great if I had an organization to bounce this off of, right? But that CPAC right now is one mom who's really trying to support it. When I came in last year, there were two, but the other parent's child went to BBT. So she withdrew from, helping support the CPAC. So, right now it's one mom, she's doing, the best that she can to help, collaborate with me and support. And, we put a new newsletter out. There was some information that she provided to the CPAC looking for volunteers, please volunteer. So that information was in there with the contact information with the Facebook page. My hands are a little tied with this because if no one comes out to manage the process, there's not anyone to collaborate
well,
with.
you got any suggestions as well, because I think that
Yeah.
even we can start participating a little bit more. I know when Diane was here, I think we made it an effort to try to be at the CPAC meetings from the
Right.
school committee. Just anything that we can do, any suggestions you have to keep this moving forward, because the consistency of it is very spot.
Who does the newsletter go out to?
It goes out to our special ed families.
So anyone with a child with an IEP or a 504?
Exactly.
And how is it distributed?
Email through our using Power School.
Okay.
Yeah, and then it's also put on the Facebook page. It was also updated or will be updated within the next day or two on the MURSD website. And there's a Facebook page, the CPAC Facebook page.
So I think I'm a little curious because about 2 years ago, CPAC was kind of rejuvenated and brought back to life. And at the first meeting, there were 38 parents there. And then last year, that was 2 years ago, and then we're kind of down for the COVID for the year and a half, but and I went to a couple of meetings and there were a fair amount of parents at the meetings that I attended. And then now we're back after COVID and I'm wondering where all the parents have gone just over COVID, if they're not aware that the meetings are happening or they're.
So there hasn't been any meetings to date. So the first one is the basic rights that's coming up on the 16th.
Okay.
And again, I think it's because there's one mom who's trying to hold down the fort for everyone. I don't think there's a partnership. I think she's tried to reach out to some people that she's familiar with, but there hasn't been anyone to help her lead it.
And the other thing is where on the website is it?
The newsletter is on the student services at the very top.
Okay, but is there a link specifically for CPAC?
There should be.
There's not.
Okay, I'll look.
I have had difficulty finding it.
Okay.
Take a look at that.
So I think the bottom line here is I think there's more that we could do to facilitate the CPAC getting together, because I think they're struggling, and it, to some extent, yeah, it is a parent-led organization.
Right.
But we could be more proactive in trying to give it a little bit more structure so that they know when to meet, have a understanding what they're trying to accomplish. Maybe there's even a schedule or a timetable for the year telling them what meetings are important to go to for different topics, things like that. Because I think it's, that's going on, I feel for it.
Right, well, that's right, yeah.
You
It's a
know?
lot, right.
And maybe after that first meeting takes place, then that's a good time perhaps to, that she'll be able to have access to more parents and talk and maybe share like what kind of help and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we could re-kick this whole thing off on the basic rights presentation.
So maybe
So,
it's just a little delayed this year with everything.
and it's understood with COVID in a way, but we just have to get it back and running.
Sounds good.
But I think there are some great steps happening. I mean, I think I go back to, the point of the program description, the CPAC, the other meetings you're having. I think those are great steps because I think the more we communicate, and it's not only communicating out, but also listening in and understanding what it is that people need to hear from us or need to understand better. in order for us to make these student and parent experiences better, I think is huge. And I think COVID has put us all behind the eight ball. You're not the only, I mean, you're kind of a little bit the point person on this. So you take it, and I think but I think we're all a little bit behind the eight ball.
But also, this presentation is very much.
It's great.
Yeah.
Thank you
It's
so
good.
much for this,
Thank you.
because just the amount of clarity that we have to get out there, it's a very good stuff.
All right, thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yes,
Could I ask some questions about the reports that were presented?
so can we actually get through the next sections and then,
Yes. But I do have questions specifically related to the one.
After, just so.
Rebecca?
We go through community comments. We'll do it during.
Okay.
let's do it after when we get through that. So next is our school committee, subcommittee updates. Budget subcommittee.
That would be me. Yes, so we met back on October 5th. And a lot of it is just setting the goals and structure for the coming year. I think we're agreed to have at least a couple, maybe 3 multi-board meetings, possibly a couple of meetings. But that'll take us through deciding on what types of budgets we have, what budget necessities we have, and also what the town's capabilities are. We'll get into more early discussions with the towns. That was, I think, an essential part of the meeting. Also, I think we're also looking at how to make the decision-making process a little bit more clear, even though the budget cycle is not conducive to making a decision about exactly what kind of money we see in August of 2022. We do want to have more capability and more insight, future insight into what we think will be in the budget for 2022, or in the balance of the budget for 2022. So I think we made a lot of very good steps. Thank you very much, Jay, for working with us on this. I think we've got some new reports we want to create, and some new presentation of data so that the town leaders can understand and be more informed as we move forward. And I think we've also kind of thought about more of a process for monitoring how we're progressing through the year. I think that's part of the meeting as well. But all in all, we're trying to get more communication, more feedback out to the community about what the budget is and where we think it's going to land, and try to get more precise in our prediction about what kind of money the school requires. So that's in a nutshell, unless you guys have any, our fellow patriots here have any comments about that.
It's good. Okay. Policy subcommittee.
Met last week. We set up a schedule to start regularly reviewing policies for the remainder of the year. We looked at a few old policies that needed updating, just clarifying roles of certain people, like who serves like as the Title IX compliance officer for policy AC non-discrimination, for example. There were a few others, just if you looked at policy ACG discrimination complaint procedure, that and specifying who the district's civil rights coordinator is, which is the director of support services. We also looked at a few other policies that we've also updated goals in as well. ACA non-discrimination, specifying that the assistant superintendent serves as the school system's Title IX compliance officer, and more. Policy JFAD, homeless students, specifying that the district homeless liaison is the director of student support services. So those were all minor changes. There were 2 that we started to look at and decided to hold off on because we're considering maybe changing them to be a bit more comprehensive. So that was policy ACAB, sexual harassment, and JICFD, bullying prevention. So we were going to look at those more closely at our next meeting. And then we discussed adding a new policy, FFA on memorials. So we started to talk about that, and this would just sort of kind of spell out, how we might look at memorials in the event of a death of a student or staff member or community member. So we are going to look at that again at our next meeting and hopefully have maybe some representation from our high school principals to offer some feedback on that. And that was about it.
Great. Questions, thoughts?
Sounds good.
All right, and then the superintendent search subcommittee.
And that was, we met prior to this meeting. So we kind of reviewed what's been done to date in terms of setting up focus groups. Letters have gone out to parents, community members, teachers, staff, students, administrators, inviting them to participate in various focus groups that will be conducted on October 25th and November 3rd, 2nd. I'm relying on memory, which is a terrible idea. So, yes, November 3rd. No, there was October 25th and November 3rd. So, and there's also an online survey. So for anyone who's not able to participate in one of the focus groups, they can give feedback through the online survey. So those will be running. And we discussed that the next step is to set up a screening committee. And we determined that that would be comprised of a group that would include one administrator, one principal, up to 3 teachers. We'd like to include each level, but we're not sure if this is going to start to get to be too big of a committee. A member of the sports staff, 1 public official from each town, parent from each school building, a student representative, and 2 members of the school committee. We're targeting November 15th and 17th for the 2 workshops for the screening committee, and November 30th, December 2nd, and December 7th as potential interview dates for the initial interview. So this all needs to be confirmed with NESDAQ to make sure that that we've sort of moved up our timeline, so we need to make sure that it's doable and also that those dates work for them. But that's kind of where we're at with that.
All right. Thank you. So with that, we'll move on to the Memorial Elementary School outdoor classroom project.
Okay.
Here you go.
Going to invite Wendy Phillip and Victoria Wilkinson, who are going to give a brief presentation, and they've also been working with Melissa as well for the Memorial PTO. And they're going to give an overview regarding a proposal for an outdoor classroom space that they've spent a lot of time on. And I hope you know, I put the pictures of it there in the packet that they'll go through. And I'll hand it over, but part of this process is to get approval tonight at this meeting, and then they're going to the Upton Board of Selectmen tomorrow night as well.
Great.
I'll hand it over.
Well, thank you. So I'm Victoria Wilkinson. I work as a fundraiser on Memorial PTO. And this all started last year. We really wanted to start making some outdoor classrooms during the pandemic, but also all the time it's great to have things outside and learning outside. So we had a spring fundraiser and we raised nearly $30,000. And part of that Part of that has been spent on, if you'll look at location A, we have, district provided 4 large rectangular picnic tables there. And we've tried to enhance that area with umbrellas and plants and some generously donated stumps for a nice outdoor seating area. But what we would like to do right there, just along the fence under the picnic table, not the whole area, we would like to put concrete pad under the picnic tables so that it can be accessible to all. So it can be really ADA accessible. Location B, which is at the top of 140 entrance. What we would like to do there is, well, first we chose this because it already has access from the front entrance. There's already crosswalks and wheelchair accessible sidewalks. What we like to do is extend the existing sidewalk to create a concrete pad, which we will then put a pavilion on top of. The pavilion will have open sides and be approximately 16 by 20 feet, big enough for 1 to 2 classes at a time. And everything would be ADA compliant. The pavilion would provide shade and protection from rain, getting kids outside, even in bad weather. So the best part is, we're not asking for any funds or anything. We're good there. And we're having more fundraisers. So even if this has to be like a 2-part project where we do one thing and then later another, we're not worried about getting it done with just parent involvement. And that's it.
Yeah, I would just add that the VGO also purchased about 6 more round picnic tables similar to the ones that the district purchased. They're made of like that, the metal powder coated material that are now up. If you're familiar with Memorial, when you pull into the parking lot in front of the school, there's like a raised hill that kind of heads out towards Fifth Ave. And so we've placed picnic tables up there as well. So they've really done a nice job trying to expand outdoor spaces for our students to work. And this would be, the final phase of something more permanent that we can have for years to come.
Questions?
It's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, well, that was awesome. Then let's move, could I get a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the outdoor learning spaces.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Passed, thank you.
Good job. Nice stuff.
All right.
All right, the next thing is a discussion around the multi-boards meeting. Upcoming multi-board meeting will be a week from today. And just a question to people, like what, discuss kind of our goals, what people want to achieve during that meeting. Just to refresh people, this meeting was put in place a long time ago, kind of reinstituted it. The focus was to get both towns, select boards, FinComs, and the school committee together with key administrative staff to basically walk through, like, one of the key focus areas has always been school budget because it's such a big component of each town's overall budget, but then also to talk about other areas and other items that we felt we could collaborate on and work together on to ensure that both towns were more aware and fully kind of cognizant of what we were doing and how we were doing it. And just making sure that our sort of question to people and board members is what do people wish to achieve in that meeting or their goals or some of the things we wish or we should be talking about there.
I would like to mention that I just think that we have, I think the relationship between the school committee and both towns has been very, very perfunctory around budgeting. And I think we should expand that a bit so that they understand that we're trying to actually perform, a service not only for the education of the kids, but also for the community as a whole, to essentially provide a good learning environment and a place where everyone collaborates on the teaching of the community's kids. And that the social contract that we have in education is that we are trying to educate our kids so that they can take over the mantle of supporting all of the elements of society in the future. So that includes retirements and healthcare and all the social services that they pay through their taxes, presuming that they will be highly productive members of society when they get out of school. So I think we have not only for the boards of the two towns, but also for any community members who want to participate in that multi-board meeting. I think we have an opportunity to show how vitally important it is to have a thriving school community and a good set of teachers and staff that can support the kids in the community and bring the community together.
So do you think it's a valid thing to go through the school strategy? And I mean, how would you bring what you talked about to life?
Well, that's a really good question. So I think an element has to be the strategy, but it doesn't need to be a detailed discussion of the strategy. In a nutshell, we're talking about basic things that schools do within a community at this point. I think people are losing perspective on what we're doing here. Instead of being this evil organization that takes up cash and tax money, can't we talk about things that are basic capabilities that we have and we do very, very well, thank you, as a regional school district. And we're achieving a lot of the objectives that we set forth, especially as compared to the last decades, maybe the aughts of 2000 and prior to that. I think we're doing an exceptional job on the types of investments we've gotten from the town. It's what are you getting for your money? It's not just about what the money is that's being spent, what's required from the state. It's what are we doing with the resources we're being given? And I want to show the community that we're actually trying to give back to the community and trying to make sure that their kids are well supported and we're fulfilling the mission of the school.
So are we thinking we want to use this time, maybe not this first meeting, but we want to set up other meetings that are multi-board-esque, that are kind of focused on the areas of the budget, like we talked about before. I know right before COVID, we had a series of presentations that were around, they're about central office costs, and they're about special ed, and they're about memorial and club, their budgeting, and MISCO versus, athletics and so forth. Are we thinking that we're looking to use that? Because I know, Dr. Cohen, we're going to do that.
We're going to do it at these meetings. We certainly
We
won't
could
have
invite
that.
them.
And we certainly have the presentations that we'll have, and we'll be able to
Yep.
share that out, so they'll be able to have all of those pieces. I don't know if that would be the best use of repeating it like a multi-board meeting with less
Yeah.
people.
I kind of agree with that. I think that having both communities, their leadership and the school district together in one room is a very good opportunity for us all to get on the same page about what we're trying to accomplish as a regional school district within these two communities.
So that talks, I think we can share a kind of a focused version of what the school strategy is, trying to deliver and do, so that at least it brings them to become more aware. I think there are a lot of people aware of it, but I think the more people become aware, the better it is. I think if I look at this meeting, I'll go to a more maybe tactical approach too, which is about, I think we got to review the budget process timing so they're aware of it. I think we have to validate who those FinCom members are going to be that are going to be participating in our budget subcommittee meetings, so we don't run into the issue we had over the last few years. We have one town appearing, one town not appearing.
Exactly.
You know, we want to validate, we want to at least start the conversation so we understand when they're going to be able to tell us kind of their projections for next year and from a revenue perspective and what they think they can provide or what we should at least think about from a planning process. And then, you know, the other thing I would say is, you know, how do we work together through this process? You know, because we do have a budget subcommittee that has components of both towns in it already. What do we go back to the multi-board with? Like what kind of engagement? I think, you know, they'll be interested in, you know, building out these models from a 3-5 year projection and cost and revenue. While they're not exact, they're more directional at best. But we want from them a set of models that talk about their revenue projections for the next 3-5 years. You know, their
See, all those are fantastic ideas. I would love it if we go over those things. I just think the basic point that we want to get across in this meeting is, I would almost want to bill this as a central meeting of the region. Say, this is what we're here for. This is why we exist. This is what we do. I know that seems ridiculous to us in education, okay? Offsite, you guys in education. It seems like it's obvious, but when the types of discussions you're having, even though we're trying to be as positive as we possibly can, they break down into a discussion of how people are who are misusing or mishandling the responsibility that we've been given. And I think we need to reestablish that relationship with those communities. And the only way I can think of doing that is by reiterating the basic social contract and trying to put a case out there for the school to say, look, we are trying to fulfill our duty, and we're doing it for a very efficient cost compared to other regional school districts, other school districts in the state, some of the more affluent school districts. So I think that's an incredibly important thing to get across in the meeting.
We may not get it across in this first meeting, but maybe a subsequent meeting.
Yeah, I mean,
It makes sense to
establishes
go
the
back and
basis for
show
the
our
discussion.
performance, you know, I'll call it, you know, the value that, you know, is being achieved by these communities from the investment that's being made into our, you know, regional schools.
Yes, I agree.
What does that look like?
But this is like, this meeting can be really the starting point of that underlying logic. Say, this is why we exist, this is who we are, this is what we're trying to do. And here are the processes we're going to go through to make sure we communicate how we're doing.
I think one of the first discussions, like we always seem to have in the first meeting, multi-board meeting, and Jay's been there for the early ones, when we talk about what are the goals. People have some very direct perspective.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I think that should come out.
Telling them the number.
Yes.
But I think it's, I think we can talk about, you know, how do we get in a future date? You know, we are happy to come and talk about what we think is the term, the value equation of education in this community and what we deliver against it.
Well, I just don't think we should put that off for very long. I think we have to establish that up front.
But I think that's something we work on before the end of the year. You know, we gotta talk to them about what they see for the cadence of these meetings and timing. You know, things like that, so.
So I welcome anybody else's opinion on this very thing.
I'll give my perspective for the initial meeting. I think, because I think there are some things, there's some broader things that I think we'll get into, but it will take some time to get into. And I think there are some other tactical things we want to make sure we're starting to get pulling in quickly. Unless then what other ideas, I don't know what other people want. But
Do we have a acceptance list for next Monday? I mean, is it gonna be
So the,
20 people? Is it all?
I'll be there.
Yeah, but I mean, is it the 6 of us, all, 6 select people?
so the agenda will need to go out, what day is the 25th? Is that Monday?
Yeah.
So that'll go out Thursday, so I'll have a draft, today's Monday, I'll have a draft by Wednesday. And then we'll send that out, and then I'll reach out to both town administrators just to see if they have a sense of, who might be there. And one thing I could do, I could just do, we're gonna be in here, but I could do just a calendar invite just to kind of have people respond to, just so we have a sense of is going to be able to come. From who I've been meeting with members from both towns in the last few weeks, and there definitely is, everyone wants to have it be a better year this year, working collaboratively together, having conversations, and that's really the initial purpose to, bring this back, is to be able to just have a positive conversation moving forward and have more clarity from us and from them too, so of where they stand budgetarily in the towns, but also what's our process and timeline for our needs. So that's the feedback I've been given, so I think I have enough for a draft agenda that I can share and send out for feedback.
So this being it's a joint meeting of all three organizations. So they're all going to open their own meetings at this place, right? So we're hosting a joint meeting. So just so everyone knows who's listening to this recording. So what that means is that participants, community members can join from all three communities, or the two communities and the school, right?
We added.
Yeah, we're the only people.
It is an open meeting, yes.
Yes, everybody needs to open their own meeting.
Yes,
So there'll be 5 meetings.
So it's not under the auspices of the school committee. This is an open meeting for all three.
Exactly, but let's also be clear that it will be governed by the same premise and same rules that each select board meeting, school committee meeting. And so, community members are more than welcome to come and listen, but most of the discussion will happen amongst the members of the various committees.
Except for the community comments.
Is one of the goals to establish a regular meeting schedule for through the budget,
Yes,
process?
through the budget process. I think as we share our budget timing, I think part of it would be, when do we have certain meetings with them? What are we doing in terms of some communication that we've already talked about? What are those things that are going to happen?
A very good example of what Vicky's talking about is we had assumptions in our head about the strategy we're moving forward with last year, not only in terms of the strategy of the school, but also in terms of the budgeting strategy, which did not jive with what the town was thinking. So that needs to be established right away on an annual basis.
Agree. We shared some of that stuff ourselves. We just never got feedback from certain areas. That's the way I'll put it. Part of the multi-board will be to try to push so we don't end up with the same situation.
Right.
And its own pieces and challenges too. So, okay.
Sounds good. That makes sense.
Okay. Other thoughts? Any others? Okay. So with that, thank you for waiting patiently. I will open board back up to community comments.
Thank you.
And remember, if anybody who wishes a muffin or other food or other cookies or anything like that that's over there, we want to thank people again. Please feel free to take some back. Sorry.
We're going back this time. Again, Shelley Clark from Upton, also our president. Just two things for clarification, and then actually I do have a few questions. STAR program actually stands for Success Through Alternative Resources.
Thank you.
And I do request when referring to students with special needs that it is person first and not special needs students, but instead students with special needs. So my question for the report, you had asked about parents being interviewed or incorporated somehow in the report. Was Dr. Brennan, who had been a person who had been consulting with the STAR program for over 24 hours, ever consulted for this report?
I believe she was part of the clinical observations that took place.
Was her input also included in the evaluation, not just part
I
of the
didn't
evaluation?
see, so I provided a list of contact information for everyone who was employed in the district in the programs. So I did not, the report did not identify who said what. It was a combination of qualitative information that they provided.
Also, how was the company chosen? Was this part of the grant? Did a bid go out to other companies that?
It did not. No, it was just, we used that company because they were close by and Worcester.
I think there had been other companies, or at least one company that had done evaluations prior. So it's just kind of concerning that that company had not been used.
We had used Futures in previous evaluations for related service providers. Their specialty wasn't students with autism around ABA practices, so that's why we didn't use Futures. They had done a study, I think I had presented to the committee, I don't know when, but there was a report that was done prior to my arrival by Futures around related service providers and staffing and allocation. There was some recommendations about changing the structure of duties amongst the director and team chairs. So that report was done by Futures. Yep.
Okay, so you did use Futures as well as ABI?
I did not use Futures. That was in a report prior to my arrival. But I did present an update on that report because I believe there wasn't one presented when it came back because of timing. I went with a company for this that really focused on ABA instruction and practices. So the founding people are certified BCBAs. They have experience, one's a school psychologist. So I went by credentials because Futures didn't have the same, the people who had done the Futures report didn't have the same credentials as ABI.
So this didn't need to go out for bid?
I've never sent a program eval out to bid ever.
Right, I have a few different locations you want to make. Have all staff that were involved in the evaluation received a copy of this report, or is this the first time that
This is the first time, so it always goes to the superintendent and the school committee first, and then the report will be made available. I talked about that earlier.
Why was the evaluation done during the pandemic?
So as I mentioned before, Shelley, every year special ed has to pick one area that we need to review. The Department of Ed does not stop regulations for pandemics, unfortunately. So we did have to identify an area, and that was the area that I picked when I came in. We had just done the report on related service providers, and unfortunately, when I came in, I didn't have time to get kind of a sense of what was happening and what other areas may need to be evaluated. So we went with the most obvious, which is sub-separate programming.
Will there be a follow-up after the odd year we had last year, the program?
So can we hold on a second?
Sure.
Because it sounds like you've got a list of questions about some of this stuff. So maybe it'd be better because as you know, you're inside the school, you have the ability, I think, to sit with Dr. Cohen.
Actually, this is the last question.
Oh, it's the last question? Okay. It's the last question. I'm just gonna say we could stick to if you've got a lot of questions, things like that, I should say to take that little offline with Dr. Cohen and people internally, because I think you have that ability, you have that avenue to do that. Okay. Go ahead.
So that was just it. Will there be a follow-up after during the normal school year for regular observation?
For who?
For the program that was evaluated during COVID?
No, meaning like who's observing? I don't know.
Will it be ABI coming back in?
So they're coming back in, I'm meeting with them next week, so they're gonna be doing some PD for us around some of the recommendations around parent training. So they're sitting down with me next week to talk about some of the options that they have, some of the trainings that they have, to help kind of implement that parent piece and that staff piece in collaboration with our in-district BCBA. So as of right now, I don't have a plan, but I will be absolutely sure to share it once I do have one.
Thank you, Shirley.
Other comments?
Red Sox are winning 6-0.
That's good to hear.
Not that
Try to get through this.
Not this.
Put that in the notes.
Put that in the notes.
Time.
Administrator comments.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, thank you all for coming.
No correspondence?
Sorry,
Oh, wait.
we got a few that are raising their hands to talk, if that's all right.
Okay.
So I'm going to let in Alicia Bassoli, if you could state your name and the town you're from, for the record.
Dan, would you be able to project it up there too? If you're able to.
Hey, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, guys. So my name's Alicia. I'm from Upton. My daughter's a Memorial. I am the current, I guess you could call me caretaker of the CPAC that Jennifer referenced earlier. And I say caretaker just to reiterate some of her comments earlier, just around, we've all had a challenging year, I think, and it has been difficult to coordinate efforts alone. We had a couple board members leave. And I think, the key challenge on the CPAC side has been just finding other parents that, can look past maybe some of the issues or questions or concerns they have with their own child. And I have those as well. So I feel for those parents, but can look past that to contribute to the CPAC in a way that is both long-term and meaningful. We need to reestablish a board. We need to establish our bylaws. We need to set up meetings and market them and do community outreach and work with you guys on the school committee and Jennifer. It's a long list of, of activities. So we're actively looking right now for parents that are interested in that type of work and they can help join up with me to get things going again. I've wanted to, it just has been a lack of, like Jen said, sort of volunteers of people that are interested in that specific type of work. So anyways, I wanted to share out the email address of the CPAC. It's Mendon-Upton-CPAC@gmail.com. I'm currently in the process of coordinating a call with a few interested parents who have expressed interest in doing that work. And if there's anyone that's listening that also is interested, please send an email and let me know. We're actually trying to get some folks together on Monday, Tuesday next week for a chat. And again, this isn't I'm air quoting, you can't see me, but this isn't a CPAC meeting. It's essentially a discussion of some interested parents to try to talk about getting started again. So if you think you have the time and passion and energy to put forth to get things going again, please send me a note because I definitely need the help. And then we're going to be sending out a note this week with a couple of updates, including some info on the Federation's training session that Jennifer mentioned. And if you're a parent that has a child on an IEP or 504 and you're not already on our email list, again, send a note to mendonuptoncpac@gmail.com and I can add you to that list to get future updates. The updates have been sparse recently, but the hope is that we'll have more as we get some more parents interested and involved. So thanks for everybody's time.
Thank you, Alicia. Please keep the school committee on copy on some of these updates so that we understand what's going on. Is that okay?
Yeah, is there a I don't know the email. What's the school committee email?
That works now.
You got it.
Thank you, Alicia.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we have two more, or I'm sorry, it looks like one more. So Gina, if you could state your name and the town you're from for the record.
Okay, hello, I'm Gina. I'm from Upton. I'm here, I guess, sort of repping for the MURSD parents group. I just want to start by saying thank you to the school committee. This is I'm tired just watching you guys. So it's a long night and we greatly appreciate you. But I do have some comments. I mean, my initial comments were going to be general about things you're already planning to work on, like communication and transparency. I don't have a kid in the special ed program, but I'm a little involved, a little in touch with these parents. And I can say that, I have gone hunting around in the last month looking for information. And you guys know I hunt. I look around. I try to find as much as I can. I'm on the Student Support Services site right now. The last press release was in 2019. That's, this rights meeting, the CPAC meetings. I think that ideally MURSD would drive some of this because you guys are the experts, the administration is the experts, parents don't know. They don't know how to start, how to organize. And this meeting that's coming up in November, while great, really, in my opinion, would probably be better off in like August. Unless this is a meeting for next year's enrollment, I don't really know. But, and beyond just the SPED issues with communication, other parents have spoken to me about, not being aware of changes in the classrooms, but through their own children. There just seems to be, people are really looking for more communication from teachers, from the admin. And hopefully at some point, I know we have a lot of s'mores, newsletters, there's emails, but there doesn't seem to be a centralized resource. Maybe someday we can have a dashboard. You guys have good ideas, but those are my thoughts. Thank you. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. So let me add one piece, which is, I think the question people have is where's the link on the website for CPAC? It's actually under the parent section. It's not under student services. So it's under the parent section. And there is a link in there that goes out to Facebook, which has, I think, a variety of updates and things that are there. I think there'll be more information over time and things that are there, but at least I want to give people that basic piece of what is there. We've had a lot of different conversations here. So.
If I could add something too, just to Gina's comments too, just so people are aware, in our strategic plan, revising and updating the website is a big part of our plan. And so within the next month, there'll be a survey that goes out related to the development of a communication plan to improve our communication district-wide. We've already put a few things in place, but we know that there, in the last couple of years, things have gone where they haven't been updated over COVID, and we're going to be seeking input in order to see, okay, what are you looking for? What specifically you're going? Our website is the hub. That's what we want to drive everything off the website. So that will become the hub for information. And we know it's not there, but we'll be asking for input of what you're looking for so that we can continue to improve that for all of our stakeholders. So just thank you for bringing that up, but it's definitely on the radar.
It's great.
Then we have one more. Deb, if you could state your name and where you're from for the record.
I'm sorry, I had to press unmute. Yeah, well, you said my name. I'm Deb and from Mendon. Yeah, just wanted to say thank you for bringing up the CPAC information and this talk about being cognizant of the fact that we need to improve communication, because I really appreciate that and can attest to the fact that I think it does need to be improved. And following through with the CPAC and trying to help us get organized, that would be great. And just to remain on the radar with the school committee, if it can be a topic of discussion, even, every other meeting, that would be great to make sure that we're making progress and making it meatier. That would be terrific. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
I think we are
That's about it.
on the Zoom side.
Thank you for the comments. Next is other matters not anticipated by the committee within 48 hours of the posted meeting. Do we have any? Okay, we don't. Seeing none. How about any correspondences? All right, future agenda items, school improvement plans. We'll be talking about at probably the next meeting or the meeting
I
after.
have to double check the schedule, but it's coming up.
It's coming up.
We'll start to see them.
It's great. Then we'll have feedback on the multi-board meeting and the budgeting process probably as well in the next meeting. So it's good to hear. Then could I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to
Watch
adjourn.
the Red Sox.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you all.
Thank you for filling in.
Yeah, I,
Filling in,
you can't fill in.
Did you get it? Filling in?
Yeah, good, Jim. Way to go.